Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Barry Merrick. I'm co-founder and CEO at Ivy and the chapter chair of YPO Metro New York. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce all of you to Colin Bryar and Bill Carr. Colin and Bill, how are you today?
Great.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
It's so good to have you both here. We're going to be having a transformative conversation for all of us. We're going to be exploring how we can each leverage Amazon's key secrets to better unlock our potential, that of our organization, and better achieve all the goals that we have. Colin and Bill are the founders of Working Backwards, where they coach executives at both large and early stage companies, really focused on how they can best implement the management practices that enabled Amazon to achieve everything that it did. So I'm going to give you a little background on each of them, and then we're going to dive in straight from there. So starting with Colin, he joined Amazon 4 years after its founding and spent 12 years as part of Amazon's senior leadership team. He was VP at Amazon, and for 2 of his years, he served as the chief of staff to Jeff Bezos and was referred to as Jeff's shadow. After Amazon, he and his family relocated to Singapore, where he served as COO of an e-commerce company called Redmart, which was subsequently sold to Alibaba. Bill Carr was Amazon's former VP of digital media, and under his leadership, Amazon launched and managed the Amazon global digital music and video businesses, which includes all the amazing products we like, such as Amazon Music, Prime Video, and Amazon Studios. Recently, these 2 gentlemen joined forces and wrote a book called Working Backwards: Insights, Stories, and Secrets from Inside Amazon, which is an extraordinary book that I highly recommend to everybody. So today, we get 60 minutes together to really learn from their experience and to really challenge them to challenge us on how we can really get out of our comfort zone and implement these practices that can enable us to not just grow exponentially, but also set up environments in which our people can truly thrive. So again, Bill and Colin, thank you for being here. To get us started, I want to ask you both, you spent all this time on Amazon. You've been working with so many different companies now. Share with us, when you look to the future, what's the vision that drives you? What's the impact that you're looking to make? And how is this new book kind of playing a role in that?
Well, I guess I'll jump in and take that first. So, yeah, we feel like we were blessed and lucky to have been in the right place at the right time by being in Amazon at a sort of a critical time and actually having roles that specifically gave us a front row seat to the development of really not only the businesses that have powered all of Amazon's growth. So there was this window of time between 2003 and 2005 when it was a period of great innovation for the company, when products and businesses like Amazon Prime, the whole digital media business, which has since gone on to result in devices everywhere from Kindle, Fire TV, the Echo and Alexa, to services that I was leading and running, like Amazon Music and Prime Video, Amazon Web Services, Fulfillment by Amazon. All these businesses actually started or were germinated in this one narrow window of time. And Colin and I had a front row seat. We were either, in the room in the meetings where these things were happening, or actively starting and leading some of these businesses. And but most people all know the story. These are products that people around the world are quite familiar with. But the sort of the secret or the news that we wanted to share with people that people don't understand is that all these businesses have one remarkable thing in common, is that just as Amazon and Jeff Bezos were so inventive to develop these phenomenal global businesses, he was equally inventive in actually coming up with an intentional management science that Amazon developed in the same window of time that would allow it to not only grow and enable such diverse businesses from cloud computing to digital devices and e-commerce, but to enable really the company to, in his words, create an invention machine that allow the company to be innovative for years and decades to come, and a machine that would allow the company to operate at an extremely high level with extremely high levels of quality and reliability, and that this will allow the company to be successful for decades to come. And so what drives us and propels us forward, frankly, is sharing this science, this management science, this model, and these scalable, repeatable processes for how anyone can run their company, and to share them with the world to really enable the next generation of business leaders to learn from what Amazon and Jeff Bezos have done and apply them to their business, so that we can really advance the field of management science in the United States and the world in general, and help companies become and leaders be more effective.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bill. That was a great foundation. And what really struck me in your description, like that phrase you use around becoming an invention machine, right? No matter what company we're running, no matter what kind of organization we're focused on, what industry and so on, in a world that's changing all the time, right? I mean, in business, you always have to innovate, but especially now as the pace of change is accelerating, it's more important than ever. So very excited to dive into the key frameworks that you've been able to kind of like take from Amazon to implement in these companies. Before we do that, I do want to ask you, when you come across people who know Amazon or think they know Amazon and how it works, what do you find to be like the biggest misperceptions or the biggest myths about Amazon and its practices, specifically when it comes to management and innovation? So what do people actually get wrong about, what it's all about? And then once we've covered that, we'll dive into what actually makes it tick.
I would say one misconception. So Amazon's famous for its long-term thinking and long-term approach to various businesses. And people take that and say, well, that means Amazon doesn't care about profits but long-term thinking. So I think one misconception is that you often get to where you want to go faster using long-term thinking. So long-term thinking doesn't necessarily mean it will take you longer to get there. And two examples are Amazon was the fastest company to $100 billion in revenue. And that was used with, since Amazon was founded in 94, just focusing on the customer experience. And in the 1997 shareholder letter, which was Amazon's first public shareholder letter, Jeff Bezos said it's all about the long term, and that the interests of customers are perfectly aligned with the interest of shareholders over the long haul. And another data point is that the fastest company to $10 billion in revenue was actually Amazon Web Services. If you took that as a standalone company, we went from $0 to $10 billion faster than Amazon, the company went from $0 to $10 billion. So they did it again, even faster. So that is one misconception. Another one is that you don't have to do $125 billion in a quarter to take some of these lessons that we talk about, the invention machine, to incorporate them in your organization. A lot of what Amazon does and these processes that Amazon developed work for small teams, because what Amazon wanted to do was have a large number of small teams working together towards a common goal. So these are things that you can take away in your organization of 5 or 50 or 50,000, and they have this nice, wonderful fractal quality to them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colin. Any other misperceptions, Bill, that you come across?
It's really the misperception is more of an issue where people just don't understand how Amazon has done it, and part of the reason for that is the approach that Amazon takes to management and decision making is actually quite unconventional. So much so that over the years, as I recruited and hired senior executives from other companies, they would sort of endure a bewildering, initial 3 to 6 month period with the company, where everything that they learned and knew about how they should, everything from how they would think about hiring people to conducting a meeting to making decisions, it seemed as if everything was inverted for them and they had entered some other world. And so, and as a result, often when Amazon would launch new products and services that the press or customers would initially scratch their head and say, I don't get it. Like, for example, back in 2011, when we initially launched Prime Video, it was included at no additional cost with the existing Prime shipping service, and everyone said, I don't get it. This was a subscription service for fast free shipping. How is it now a subscription service also for movies and TV shows too? I don't get it. But the logic behind it, which is perhaps more self-evident today, is that the household penetration of movies and TV shows is extremely high, and it's a frequently used. Many people watch movies and TV shows every day, and by adding something with such broad appeal and with such high frequency, those are the best kinds of businesses for a subscription. And by reinforcing the Prime shipping membership with an additional high frequency, high household penetration subscription service, Prime is now, I believe, if not the largest, one of the largest subscription services on the planet today, with well over 100 million subscribers who enjoy a broad suite of benefits.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much for those and for getting us to zoom out. So diving in now, in your book, you've specifically kind of narrowed it down of all the things that make Amazon a very special place for growth and innovation and so forth, and creating some incredible new products and services. You've come up with, 6 kind of key areas, I guess, in terms of like what makes it all tick. And then in the second part of your book, you've actually got examples of specific products and services and how they came about. What would be really helpful for all of us is to just get initially like a bird's eye view of, what are those key ingredients in the recipe of this Amazon method, the Amazon way of doing things, without going into too much in depth into each one, just to get an idea of the big picture. And then we'll go through each step one by one after that to really get your thoughts on what are immediate things we could do in our organizations and in our day-to-day lives to, kind of get more effective and being closer to, our full potential of becoming innovation machines ourselves.
Colin, you want to take that?
Sure. So the what we call the invention machine, and it's a term Jeff used, but how we define it in the book is it's Amazon's 14 leadership principles, underpin everything. The reason why Amazon does things and how they make decisions. So they're the 14 leadership principles. We're not going to go into all of them now. It's unusually high for a company, but they're not just posters on the wall at Amazon. So I guess the one takeaway from that is the way Amazon makes them not just posters on the wall is they stitch and weave it into every important process that the company does on a daily basis. So the processes themselves reinforce the Amazon leadership principles. And that's how Amazon can handle those, having that large of a number. And it also helps people make tough decisions when Jeff Bezos or the senior leaders aren't in the room. They have a good set of first principles to fall back on. So that underpins everything. And then there are 5 processes that we talk about in the book. One is how to hire. Amazon has a bar raiser process for hiring. And it's all about removing bias from the hiring process and using a data-driven approach to vet whether this person is going to come into the company and reinforce the Amazon leadership principles, or is that not the person not the right fit for Amazon? So people can self-select out if they find out that these leadership principles, this is not the type of company that I want to be in. So there's the bar raiser process. And then Amazon likes to organize into what we call separable single-threaded teams. So if something is worthy of doing and important enough, you should have a full-time single-threaded leader on it who has the capability to get things done. And then the next process that we talk about is how Amazon communicates. They're famous for using what's called Amazon narratives, which are 6-page memos. So the decision-making meetings at Amazon are very atypical compared to using slides that other companies do. And then how the next one is the working backwards process. It's a very critical process to Amazon. We also called it, that we titled our book Working Backwards. That's how Amazon takes ideas and uses a customer-centric approach to decide whether these ideas are worth taking to market. And then the last one is just, we talk about how Amazon uses metrics to manage businesses large and small. And the one takeaway there is Amazon focuses heavily on what we call controllable input metrics versus output metrics. Output metrics are those shiny things like revenue, gross profit, free cash flow. Amazon cares about those, but they spent the bulk of their effort defining and measuring what activities, if we do these things right and can we measure them, will they yield the desired output in those output metrics that I just listed. So that when you encapsulate those 5 processes and surround them with the Amazon leadership principles, that's the invention machine. The last thing I'll add is your company has your own leadership principles, so you don't have to take Amazon's leadership principles to use this invention machine. And as a matter of fact, we would recommend you define your own leadership principles and then layer them and infuse them into these 5 processes.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Colin. So in terms of what I want to do is, I mean, you've got the leadership principles, then you've got the 5 processes. I'm excited to dive into each one just to see, okay, how can we get a bit closer to our North Star by implementing the key learnings from Amazon? But let's start with the leadership principles specifically. Obviously, there's 14 of them, and probably each one deserves a 60-minute conversation in its own right. But if you could just share with us, when you work with companies and when you're looking at other companies, like how would you recommend calibrating their leadership principles? So binary, some companies will have already some kind of values or principles, some will not. So clearly having them is probably helpful. But what would you say, what would be your recommended, given how Amazon developed its leadership principles, what would you say is a way to work backwards and really kind of try to figure out, well, what are the things that we want to bring into every process at our company? Any suggestions there for everybody listening? What's an exercise or activity that could be done to get a bit closer to really robust leadership principles?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is that some people would call them values, some people would call them leadership principles. And in some cases, companies use them different ways. So the first thing is the leadership principles, as we define them, are the principles that define what does role model leadership look like inside your company. So literally, if you had to design the prototypical an ideal leader in your company, what would be the attributes of that person? So they're different from, some companies may have values that would be external facing, things they put on their website, things they communicate to their customers. These are not those. Okay, these are an internal tool to define the prototypical leader, and also to give specific and those principles should also give specific guidance so that when you, the CEO, or the other leaders are not in the room, how do the other team members in your company fall back on these principles to help them make decisions? In terms of how to develop them, really what we recommend is to have someone like a head of people or in the people organization go around and do a survey and actually the first step of the survey is to actually talk to the CEO and find out what is the vision for the company for the next 5 to 10 years. The CEO needs to articulate that vision. And then this head of people or someone in that group needs to go around to the different leaders in the company and say, okay, based on the vision that our CEO has articulated, which is this, what are the kinds of skills and capabilities we're going to need in our people to actually achieve that vision? As well as asking, well, what are some of the skills and attributes that make of the leaders in our company that make them great and are specific to our company today? So it really needs to be a combination of what are those great distinctive skills and attributes today in your company, and also what are the ones you're going to need in the future to actually achieve your vision. And then once you've gathered all this data, then you kind of need to go to the next step, which is to how to actually draft the leadership principles themselves. And what we recommend is that each one of the principles needs to be, you need to kind of wear your marketing hat. If you read Amazon's 14, some of them are very quirky and distinctive, like write a lot or think big, ones that are very specific to Amazon. And so you might want to put your marketing hat on and make them quirky and specific to your company, the title as well. And then what you really have to sweat are the details of the 2 to 3 sentence descriptor of each one of them that really clearly defines what does this trait look like? How is it exhibited inside your company? How is it used and employed? This process is challenging and difficult. Amazon spent months actually refining their list of leadership principles, refining the names of each one, refining the descriptors and words. And this is time well spent by the CEO and whomever the CEO wishes to include in their executive team in that process. But it's certainly critical that ultimately the CEO and the leadership team feel bought in and agree that these are the right leadership principles. And then once you've got this list, you need to spend a lot of time communicating these to your organization. And so, in fact, if you're not sick and tired of talking about them, then you're not doing it enough. So it really needs to be something in every all hands meeting, in almost every meeting you have, where you the CEO or another leader are part of a discussion or decision. If you're not referencing one of the leadership principles, it's a sign that you maybe don't have the right ones. You should be referencing them and referencing them as to why you think this is the right decision, and refer back to a leadership principle. Another good clue that they're working for you is that they are embedded in your hiring process. So you literally use this set of leadership principles as the reference to decide who is the right leader to come into my company. And then you also refer to this set of principles when you think about performance management, coaching and developing your people, that the way that they do the work, that the leadership principles should define that. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but those are some tips on how to think about the leadership principles and developing and implementing them in your company.
Yeah, that was brilliantly done, Bill. Thank you so much. So essentially, like, the key distinction here is these are not just values and so on. These are like very much living principles that are intended to help guide decisions. Yes, who to hire, but also what to do, how to go about it, and so on. So in summary, my key takeaways is, working from the vision developed by the CEO and senior leadership, and marrying that with, okay, well, what does an ideal leader look like now? What should they look like in the future? And how can we give them these, quirkily titled, catchy, specific to the company principles, but with accompanied by 2-3 sentences that actually help people to make decisions according to them, especially also in hiring, to make sure people with these attributes are the ones that the company is growing with, especially when it's experiencing fast growth. So last thing I'll say is just like the fact that for all of us, I think, like, do we have leadership principles this robust, right? If Amazon is a 10 out of 10 at this, like, where are we? I think that's a question for all of us, 0 to 10, something to reflect on. And then how could we get closer there? And that kind of litmus test of like, well, if you're not referring to them, then they're not really your leadership principles, because like no one's talking about it. That's a really powerful actually way to check. So thank you for all of that, Bill. Let's go. You already started talking about hiring, and I know that's the first process out of the 5 that you guys kind of focused on in the book. Share with us bar raiser process. Some of us have heard about this already, but tell us like just the general filter with which new recruits are looked at, and what are the very specific things we could be doing in our organizations to hire in a more smart way when hiring is picking up.
Yeah, so we won't go into the whole bar raiser process, but some of the specific things that Amazon does, as Bill alluded to, the first thing you want to do is you want to have a deliberate process to vet whether this candidate will embody the leadership principles of your organization. And there's a whole different set of issues. Do they have the functional skills? If you're interviewing a software engineer, a data scientist, a lawyer, you want to make sure that they have the functional skills to do the job. But the part about the bar raiser process we want to talk about is how you map those leadership principles and figure out whether the candidate embodies them. And so the way it works is, you have an interview loop of 5 to 7 people. You divide up the leadership principles between them. And then the person going into the interviewer has a deliberate task to go figure out for the one or two leadership principles that they have, does this candidate exhibit the leadership principles? And they do it through a technique called behavioral interviewing. Rather than asking about, tell me about your resume or hypothetical brain teaser questions, it's ask what have you done in the past that, tell me about a time when you had to convince a room of an unpopular idea. And you want to ask questions like that elicit behavior, specific things that they did that embodied the leadership principles. The other thing that's, I think, unique about the bar raiser process is there's a specific role called the bar raiser. And that bar raiser, it's the person is not in the chain of hiring command. So they don't have a vested interest whether this group hires the person or not. The hiring manager often needs to hire 2 or 3 people or they're not going to hit their goals. And urgency bias is one of the things that creeps in there. Well, we're on the fence about this, but I need these 3 people or our team won't hit our goals for the year. So the bar raiser's sole job is one of the key jobs of the bar raiser is to ensure that the process goes, that the person actually raises the bar and meets the leadership principles. They don't have any skin in the game if you pass on that. And the bar raiser is also a trainer. One of the things that is also unique is there's a very deliberate process, but then there's a debrief meeting that the bar raiser runs, not the hiring manager. And you talk about all of the interviewers come in. By definition, each individual interviewer does not have enough information to make a complete hire or no hire decision. So the group gets together and reads written feedback from the interview. That's the first thing that happens. So the first 15 minutes of the interview debrief is silent reading, which is again atypical. And people look at their votes and everyone else's votes, and then the bar raiser runs the meeting from there. And you can change your vote based on new information that comes in. One of the things that the bar raiser does is they want to guide the group to make the right hiring decision. And the last thing I'd add is the bar raiser does have veto power. If the bar raiser thinks that this person the candidate doesn't embody the leadership principles, they can veto if the hiring manager. In practice, that veto power rarely gets used because a bar raiser, one of their jobs is to train people to be better interviewers and to help the hiring manager make the right decision. So, we could go into bar raiser process for a lot longer, but those are some of the unique features. And it's all about, does the candidate embody the leadership principles using behavioral interviewing, and then also trying to remove as much urgency bias from the interviewing process.
Well, and just to clarify, Colin, so is it correct to say each incoming person needs to be deemed better than the average of the team that they're joining when it comes to embodying these leadership principles? Is that a
that is one way to look at it? And that you rate, does this person raise the bar? And another question is, what is this person's superpower? That they raise the team. No one candidate is going to ace all 14 of the leadership principles. Everyone has areas to improve. But if you hire someone who is below average, then what you're doing is you're gradually lowering your standards of the company. If you keep doing that, well, they're right on the fence. Then you're not going in the direction you want. Jeff Bezos used a quote: if the bar raiser process works, 10 years from now, you would look around and say, I'm glad I got in when I did, because I've never passed the bar with these people here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So essentially, it's like creating this objective process where someone that isn't going to be as pressured to make the hire is making sure that this person raises the bar. And to assure that objectivity, you've got multiple people interviewing. They're anchoring their questions based on these leadership principles so that the feedback that's coming out is actually anchored in what the company is all about. And then you raise the bar from there. So, and I love that question of the superpower too. It's not about finding the person who's perfect at all 14 things. It's just about will their superpowers raise the bar across the board with all at stake? Excellent. Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, there is no person that's perfect on all 14 things. And so it's really about seeing, do they have extreme strengths in one or more that are going to make a real contribution? because everyone will have some weakness in, you know, 2 or 3 of these. And part of the question is, are the weaknesses debilitating or are they manageable?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill. That's very helpful too. So this is really helpful. So next one is this like separable single-threaded teams. If something is worthwhile, someone should lead it. So share with us, you know, how exactly, you know, teams that don't necessarily get this right, what are the action steps to make sure, what are the pitfalls to avoid, and how, when you do have a person like that, how do you make sure they're properly empowered to be successful in such a role?
A role as a single-threaded leader.
Yeah.
So the single-threaded leadership model is the model that Amazon developed for how they seek to organize the company and organize teams. And it was a specific solution to a specific problem, which was that in the early 2000s, as the company started to grow and enter more diverse businesses, we entered a world of a lot of resource contention of different teams needing the software organizations or operations teams to do a variety of different things. And we needed to figure out a way to solve that. So we started off by taking the route that most companies take, which is to increase the level of communication and coordination between teams, and implemented a process designed to facilitate that collaboration and coordination. However, after about a year, we discarded that process because we decided that in fact we were spending more time collaborating and coordinating and less time actually building and inventing on behalf of customers. So we sought a solution to that problem. And the unconventional solution was that we sought to determine how can we actually collaborate and coordinate less between teams. And so the way that the company did that is by creating small autonomous teams where each team had the resources they need to pursue the specific business or technology or operations initiative that they oversaw, and have a leader who was single-threaded focused on that one particular business or initiative. Where instead, in a lot of companies, senior executives may have a very broad remit to handle current businesses as well as new product initiatives and innovations. Instead, the company took some of its most senior executives and put them on very narrowly focused businesses. And as a simple example, that happened to me, where I was leading one of the largest business of the company back in 2003, which was the physical books, CD, DVD, the media business for Amazon at the time, which was a physical media business. And we sought to then build a digital media business. So instead of the conventional approach would have been for me to do that as part of my remit of managing physical media. Instead, Jeff decided that my manager, Steve Kessel, and I should actually stop work altogether on managing the largest business and focus exclusively on managing this business that didn't even exist yet, which was Amazon's digital device and media business. And in doing so, we became single-threaded focused on that new business and weren't distracted by the inevitable time commitment required to manage what was a very large business. Inevitably, that large business would have always co-opted the majority of our time. So what Amazon figured out, though, is by having putting some of its better leaders on some of the businesses that it aspired to get into, because the same thing happened, by the way, with Amazon Web Services. Andy Jassy, who will become then the second CEO of the company, he spun out and from working with Jeff directly, and he could have had any job in the company, and he decided to work on AWS, which didn't exist as a business at that point, and focused exclusively on how to cultivate and build that. So what Amazon figured out is the way to cultivate innovation, even as your company is a multi-billion-dollar revenue company, which it was all the way back in 2003, 2004, is to take some of its leaders, take them off of managing that existing large business, and let them be establish their own teams to be single-threaded focused on specific new initiatives. So that's the way the single-threaded leader model works.
Brilliant. Very powerful. Thank you so much for that, Bill. I know that we've only got a few minutes before we're going to dive into audience questions, so I'm going to continue full speed ahead. let's talk about we talked about the leadership principles, hiring, the method of ownership based, like single thread leadership. Let's now go to communication, which I would say, I mean, I'm probably most agree in team sports and teams across the board. Communication always plays this critical role. What truly drives effective communication at Amazon? And what are a couple of different practices we could all be adopting within our teams to really remove the roadblocks to communication and to make it as effective as possible for the time that it takes?
So I'll try to answer that one very quickly. It's because to get to questions, but using narratives, which at Amazon, it's really a 6-page memo versus slides to make decisions. Slides are typically presentation tools. They're not the tool to go deep into a complex business problem that has ambiguity. You may not have all the information and you need to apply lots of judgment to make the right decision. And so Amazon back in 2004 realized that even though every other company was using PowerPoint to go review issues, it was the wrong tool. We had well-intentioned, very smart, motivated people trying to make decisions, but we were just using something different. So we ripped the Band-Aid, and it was Jeff who said, from this point forward at the Amazon management meetings, we're going to use narratives. And it was a journey to get to how to write great narratives. The first narratives that we tried were laughably poor compared to what they are today. But the reason why narratives actually are a better decision-making tool is, one, it forces the writer or the writing team. The narratives are often collaboratively written by a team, not just a single author. It forces them to really synthesize their thoughts versus throwing a couple of slides and winging a presentation. The second one, it removes bias in terms of presentation bias, but it floats the idea to the top. Because at the end of the day, no one really cares what happened in the meeting. Customers care, did the company make the right decision to build the right product for me to use? And so that's the goal, is to make the right decision. And if you can come up with a technique where the best idea floats to the top, that's you'll more often than not make the right decision. It doesn't guarantee you'll make the right decision. The other thing why narratives shine over slides is just the amount of information you can get is about 10 times the amount of information. In terms of pixel density, that's about 7 to 9 times a slide versus a narrative. People read faster than people talk, so you can cover more information, and then you can cover these multi-causal issues better in a narrative than a hierarchical slide. So that's another reason. And then the last thing is, if you're a leader running multiple lines of businesses, an hour in a PowerPoint meeting and an hour in a narrative meeting is still an hour of your time. You can get 10 times the amount of information and dive deeper into the same amount of issues with the same unit of time and make better decisions and stay informed on businesses. So Jeff has called using narratives one of the best things that Amazon has done. It's a fairly easy change for you to make in your organization if you're willing to, rip the Band-Aid and try it. It will take a little while to get right. Amazon meetings are unusual in that the first 20 minutes are silent, and either collaboratively or you hand out the document, but it's mostly collaborative now, given what's going on. People are reading and commenting in the document, and then you have an in-depth 40-minute discussion. And the reason why there are 6-pagers is because we found out just through experimentation, that's about the unit of time. If you reading 6 pages takes about 20 minutes if it's at the right level of depth for the decision-making process. Hard to cover this in very quickly.
That was super helpful. Just really quickly, share with us the structure of the 6 pages, like what are the main sections, and then also share with us when you go switch from the 20 minutes of reading to 40 minutes of discussion, what's the structure of the discussion? So structure of the document, structure of the discussion, and we'll continue from there.
So it's really the 6 pages of format. There are different types of narratives. Amazon uses one called the PRFAQ, which I think we'll get into in a bit later, to make product decisions. You can have a monthly or quarterly business review, and that would have a structure of, what were the key accomplishments, what mistakes did we make, how are we going to organize to get the top initiatives done for the next quarter or the next period. Another thing that we found useful, and in the book, there's an appendix called the tenets. Whereas if you're coming back and looking at something over and over again, reviewing a business, you can come up with the key tenets of the business. And that's just a caching function to say, okay, when the going gets tough, here are the key tenets that we're going to fall on in this business to make the decisions. But the beauty of the narrative there isn't a very specific format. An FAQ works in different narratives because you get to use the Socratic method on paper, essentially, to ask and answer the tough questions. And then you asked about how the meeting actually, when you transition. So after the 20 minutes of reading in the meeting, you just open it up for questions. You can either go around the room or you can review the document online. Some of the questions will be answered in a collaborative thing like Google Docs or Word on my Office Online, and you can go through and answer them. And what that does is it leaves a record of and then you make your decision, and it leaves a record of what was discussed in the meeting, so you don't have to go back and relitigate issues about what happened. Whereas if you hear a presentation, everyone hears something slightly different. You may all leave excited about what's going on, but have a slightly different view because you hear what you want to hear and you've got your biases that, oh yes, this is the point that I took away from it. And you go away and do different things. And having an organization do different things, that's how you slow down, and that's how you build up. You're known as nimble because everyone walks away with a different idea. That doesn't happen with the narratives. And it's really the discussion is more clinically focused on the idea, not the presenter. And the nice thing about it is the most junior person in the room could have the best comment in the document. So everyone doesn't follow what the senior person does or says in there, because it's all written feedback to start off.
So are they writing this as they read, or 20 minutes is up and then there's a furious typing session where people are just commenting over the 40 minutes at the same time?
Usually you're writing in comments while you're reading. And if you're looking at some people still use the physical page, and you write your comments and then you'll go around and you can review them verbally. So, Jeff Bezos, for instance, he would often write his comments and then have the discussion based on that.
Okay, excellent. Super, super powerful. So we've only got a couple minutes left, and then we got to switch gears to the audience Q&A. So we've got two areas remaining in the 5 key processes you've developed. So share with us, on the one hand, working backwards, so that process of starting with the desired customer experience, as well as specifics on how you're managing inputs versus outputs. Just a couple of examples of what exactly does that mean. Then we'll dive in and get our great audience Q&A going.
So the working backwards PRFAQ process is the process that Amazon uses to develop any new product, feature, initiative in the company. And the way it works is very simple, which is that the first thing you do is you write a 1-page or less press release describing this new product or feature. And the reason why this is called the working backwards process is that normally in a product development process, writing the press release is the last thing you do. So right before you're about to ship the product and launch it. And the reason why Amazon came up with this process is because when you actually are sitting down to write a press release, you're very mindful, you're almost exclusively mindful of how will I describe this product to customers in a way that's going to make them very excited to get out of their chair and run to the store or go online and buy this thing. And in doing so, what you really need to describe is a very specific problem that customers have. And ideally, it's a big and important problem, one that's important enough to them that they're willing to spend money to solve that problem. And then part 2 is that you describe a clear and elegant product solution that addresses that customer problem. And by doing so, you are at this point not worrying about the various constraints you may have of that. If, for example, your product is describing something that requires fantastic AI capabilities, you may not have those capabilities today, or it may describe a partnership that's required that you may not have in place, or may have a difficult financial or business model problem. But you don't worry about that when you're writing the press release. You're just worried about, well, customers love this product. Then in step two, if you've actually achieved step one, that then people read this press release and say like, yes, people would want this. This is addressing a big, important customer need. In the FAQ, then you start to address these various constraints to say, okay, well, if this requires us to solve certain business, what are the problems that I'll have to solve to actually bring this product to life? Because ideally what you're doing is you're inventing the future. You're inventing on behalf of customers. And if you truly do that, then there's going to be one or more problems you're going to need to solve. If there were no problems to solve, then this product already exists today. So then what you do is you in the FAQ section, you ask and answer like, what are these various problems? What are the different issues that I need to address? And so that's where then you start to work backwards from the ideal customer experience to actually the reality of whether this is capable or not. And so long story short, the benefit of this process is that it's very lightweight. Any one individual can go write a PR FAQ document, or a small team or large teams, it doesn't matter. Whereas other processes to conceive of or develop products, like creating a prototype, developing high quality mock-ups, like those are very expensive and difficult processes. And this way you can actually cycle through lots of different product ideas. You can review countless PR FAQs as a leadership team and then decide which ones are actually the best opportunity for us, and focus your team on working on the biggest and best opportunities.
Any constraints on the FAQs? You said the PR, the first page has to be, it's just one page or less. Why it's great for the customer? Like, yeah, sorry, what's the need and why it's great? What about the FAQs? Is like can it be 100 pages, or are you talking like you got to also keep them relatively short so you can be focused?
I mean, in general, it's always, having page limits is useful because it forces the writer and the team to actually have clarity of thought and be very clear about identifying what are the important problems we need to discuss and review. So in general, the same rule of thumb applies. Like you should probably have the whole document be 6 pages or less so that it conforms with a 1-hour meeting. You have enough time to read it and enough time to discuss it. The FAQ section is broken into 2 parts. One is external FAQs and the other is internal. External would be questions that customers and the press would ask, more details about the product, where they can get it, how it works, et cetera, et cetera. And the internal ones would cover all of your bases, everything from the financial model to technical issues to partnership issues to what's the TAM, the total addressable market for this, what's a pro forma P&L look like, all of those things that anyone in the company would ask you. And you've actually anticipated the questions that your most senior executives or other teams are going to ask.
Brilliant. That was awesome, Bill. Thank you so much. Any quick thoughts on data and how to leverage it, the inputs versus outputs? Specifically, what are those most commonly used input-focused metrics that you focus most on Amazon, so that we can think about whether we're doing a good job at that or we could improve a bit more?
Yeah, so I'll try to, it's a very broad topic. I'll try to cover it briefly, but if you think about your business as a process and you're only looking at what comes out of the process, but not knowing what's going into it, you're kind of running blind. You're running your business blind. So what you want to know is, what are the key inputs that go into this process that will yield the direct output, the desired output results? And that's where Amazon focuses almost all of its effort. And so people have probably seen the Amazon flywheel, tip of the hat to Jim Collins for that. But so the input metrics for this is the retail business, are price, selection, how many products are available for sale and can be shipped via Amazon Prime, and convenience, which is largely how fast can I get it to the customer, but it's also how fast are the apps in the web pages. So if you took a look at how Amazon reviews the retail business every week, you'd see a pretty large deck, but the vast majority of the metrics would be measuring, they'd be measuring the customer experience. They'd be heavily weighted toward, what did my customer experience with, how did they interact with my service? How many times did I miss a promise, a delivery promise? How many items were for sale this week compared to last week? And have we lowered our cost structure so we can afford to lower prices? Lowering prices is easy. Affording to lower prices is much harder. And so there's a whole set of cost metrics on there. But that's what Amazon looks at. And we've gotten the question, well, yeah, that's great, but yet revenue at the end of the day is what people really care about. At what level in the organization do you switch to just looking at the real metrics? And the answer is it doesn't switch. So the Amazon has something called the S-Team goals, which are the top goals for the company. And in 2010, I think there were 452 of them. And 360 of those were directly measured the customer experience. And revenue and free cash flow were mentioned about 12 times combined out of those 452, because Amazon, they just have the conviction that if you do these 400 things right, you will get the desired output. So that's the 60 or 120 second overview of metrics. Make sure that you define your controllable input metrics. And that's hard. It goes into, it's a journey to figure out that mapping. So if you embark on that, you're going to get some things wrong, and you just pull a metric out that it's not controllable, or it's not an input metric, or you realize, hey, we should be measuring this. And so these decks, they change over time as you learn more about your business.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colin and Bill. So this has been so insightful already. I'm going to fire through these questions. They're very thoughtful. So the first question, actually, it's from two different individuals asking it in different ways. So we've got Armando Beltran, who says, I understand that one of Colin's roles was to shadow Bezos for a number of years. Given this, what were the 2-3 key behaviors from Bezos that he found most productive? And also, what were the 2-3 key behaviors that were perhaps frustrating? And then Jamie Reyes, very related question. Some misunderstanding at Amazon is Jeff Bezos's leadership. Some perception is that he is very tough, both externally and internally, sometimes insensible to people's needs, averse to partnerships, and so on. What's your experience? So just whatever you'd like to share on this point, because obviously this was so powerful in terms of the process. But then there's this legendary leader. So tell us about how those two things intersected.
Yeah. So first of all, I was very lucky to have spent 2 years, working side by side with Jeff. And one of the things I think is misunderstood a little bit about Jeff is just how great of a teacher he is. He does have brilliant insights, but he sticks with the core set of principles. And when he makes a decision that you think, oh yeah, I guess that is what we should be doing, he actually walks back how he made that decision for the people in the room. So not only do you learn a great insight, but you learn how Jeff got to that insight. And that is one of the things that we try to put some of the how into this book. You can't really teach someone to have the great product insights like a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk or even a Jeff, but you can teach people about what process, how can you create that primordial soup where you can have these ideas evolve and come out of your organization. Another thing that I really learned from Jeff is there are some teachable skills. How to be a great operator and focus on operational excellence is teachable, and you can learn it. And setting high standards it can be sometimes frustrating to get 5 or 6 emails at 7 a.m. on a Saturday of something that's wrong with your area from Jeff, and that you need to go address. But what Jeff is, he's constantly has high standards. He holds himself to those high standards, and he holds the rest of the team and the company to those high standards. And the last thing that I'll add is there are a bunch of different leadership styles that can be effective. And what Jeff taught me is look at the great leaders in your organization if you're trying to figure out, well, what type of leader do I want to be? And find out who's most like you and what leadership characteristics they have. And then you can emulate that. If you try to emulate someone who you're not, it's going to come off as not authentic. And so find a leadership style that works for you, and then double down on that. As those are a few things that I learned from Jeff over the years.
Brilliant.
I'll just add and address one other thing. So one of the questions is about the Jeff style, and also Amazon and Jeff style with respect to partnerships. So it's quite conventional for most companies to actually focus on business partnerships And I'll tell you why, because the people, if you're, those are people you meet with. You have dinner, you have business meetings with them. You might go to dinner with them. You face them every day. And a lot of companies are actually very partner centric. Now, if you're a B2B company and your partners are actually your customers and they're paying you money, then I highly recommend you do that. However, there are a lot of companies that are B2C companies, and the people that are actually paying you money, driving your revenue, are not your business partners. They are end consumer customers. And as someone who actually managed a very large B2C business in both physical and digital media, but also maintained a lot of partnerships with all the motion picture studios, the record companies, every device manufacturer on the planet, I can tell you that Amazon had an approach that that was unconventional, and it was unconventional because it was my job to actually look out for the customer, not my partners. And there are a lot of times when I could have made many, many compromises that would have satisfied and pleased those people that I had meetings with and had dinners with, but would have actually disappointed my customers greatly, or would have really shut them out from the long-term point of view. And some of these issues are actually go down to simple matters that you all enjoy today. That, for example, if you buy, or if you were to buy a movie or TV show or a digital song, in the early days, you wouldn't have had the right to actually re-download that or stream that in perpetuity. But people like me and my team actually fought hard, tooth and nail, with rights holders to enable people to actually own that. And it was very difficult for me, but I did that on behalf of customers. So I really would challenge anyone who questions whether they should be partner centric or customer centric.
Powerful reflection there. Thank you, Bill. That's a really good thought process, I think, for all of us. I'm going to just pick one additional question here from Suneet Upadrasta. The question is, what's the biggest risk that Amazon faces in the next 10 years? And what will it need to do to address those risks? And I thought this is a particularly good question, because if you're an invention machine, theoretically, is the biggest risk that you just become less inventive versus anything else? So share with us how to think about that and how that could apply to all of our businesses.
Well, I think some of Amazon's challenges, frankly, are quite specific to Amazon at this point, because it has now become one of the largest companies on the planet, and one of the largest companies in the history of business. And so there aren't many companies in the world that are approaching $500 billion in revenue. And so I think one unusual challenge they face is that in most companies, if you were to cultivate a new business or a new invention that might have a prospect in a year or two to generate $1 billion in revenue, you might be thrilled to go do that. But if you're Amazon, 1 billion of new revenue on top of 500 billion isn't going to make much of a difference. So the question is, how does Amazon maintain that culture of innovation and cultivating, new businesses when it could take, decades for them plus for those businesses to actually meaningfully contribute to the company's financial results? That's just sort of an unusual challenge in business. The good news is that the next CEO of the company, Andy Jassy, has actually created from scratch the AWS business, so he knows exactly what's involved to do that. He's already created from zero to billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, an amazing business. So he's the right person, for that job and for that challenge.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Final question for this great conversation that we had. Just want to give you both an opportunity to share with us what's the best ways in which our audience, our community, can best support each of you. How can we best engage with your work and the causes you care about? If you have a final also word of wisdom for us or a call to action, that would be a great way for all of us to wrap up today.
I'll just start really quickly. First of all, we tried to encode a lot of this in the book. It was hard to distill, what makes Amazon tick into 300 pages, but we tried to do that in a useful and actionable way. So I think hopefully our goal was to find things when you can read some of these. There are plenty of ways to build great companies. We think this is a good way and worthy of study, but there should be enough to get you going there and to ask questions. We also have a website, workingbackwards.com, that has some more information. So if you want to go find out some more information about us, and then we are interested in working with organizations who think that this method of management science is something that they want to incorporate some or all of it into their organization.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Bill, any final thoughts to add?
And we're just really happy. We're just, we all stand on the shoulders of those who've come before us. So it doesn't matter whether the field is science or art or business management. And, much of if you read the book, what you'll learn is that much of some of what Amazon adopted was derived from what other companies had done, whether those companies were Toyota or Microsoft. And so, we just want to help the next generation of business leaders to be able to access what we learned and what Amazon's developed that we know is proven and successful. And, we hope that that at least something in this book and in the principles and processes that Amazon have developed will inspire you and something that you will bring into the way you manage your company too.
Absolutely. I mean, this conversation itself was incredibly valuable. The fact that you crystallized this all in a book is extremely valuable for everybody who wants to dive deeper. And, I just want to encourage everybody here, take one of the things that Bill or Colin shared today, whether it's the refining or inventing your leadership principles, taking a go at that, or whether it's the PRFAQ, the 6-page memo. Let's try these. Let's push the needle forward. And anybody who wants to connect with Bill and Colin, feel free to let us know or reach out to them directly. Thank you again, both gentlemen. You were truly amazing today, and we're grateful beyond measure for all the insights that you shared. So all the best, and hope to support you in all that you do.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody. See you all soon. Take care.